Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action. Allen. Deep downfield. Wide open.
Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep podcast. I'm your host, as always, Kevin Masseri, here with Mike Bunt to break down a little bit from the Dolphins game. I think we kind of beat that drum in pretty nicely, Mike, but we'll get into that a little bit. We'll talk a little bit more about the Chicago Bears game with Weatherpalooza expected in Chicago. Will that game be moved to Detroit? Will it be played on Saturday? Will they move it to Sunday? Will they move it to Monday? I think anything's on the table here for that. We'll also have a guest, Lorin Cox, here on in a little while from Locked On Bears. He'll be on toward the end of the show, kind of recap what the Bears are doing. What are they looking forward to? You know, what are we seeing from Justin Fields? How's their roster looking? Some players to watch maybe on the Bears side, and kind of what's their future like in general. So we'll get into that. One of the best Bears guests we have. So I'll talk to him shortly, Mike. But first and foremost, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Cold day in Buffalo, but the Sabres are the opposite of cold. So it's nice to finally watch some winning hockey in the 7-1-6 again. And then the Buffalo Bills on a roll, having won 5 in a row. That 1 seed, I can feel it right now. It's still some tough games ahead, but things are good and excited to celebrate the holidays. It's one of the best times of the year.
Sure is. What is it? So it's 9 straight between the Bills and Sabres. So that's a pretty good Buffalo roll, isn't it?
We've been alternating months. October was good. November was bad.
Terrible.
December is good. Hopefully we can continue December into January and February and not have one of those drop-offs. But we'll see.
We're not going to include the Ohio choke job against Toledo in there. We won't include that.
We don't need to talk about a MAC championship where our starting quarterback wasn't part of it.
Wasn't theirs hurt too?
About local basketball either, because all of our teams are horrible. So this is strictly a Bills show today. We are not going to be talking about any of my other passions unless you want to bring up Tage Thompson for 1 second, because I love that man.
I got nothing to say on Tage Thompson. I don't know. I don't really know how to break down the Sabres very much, other than they probably still need a goalie, even though UPL was pretty good yesterday. But
we got to stay in our lane. Stay in our lane. We're football guys. That's what we.
Yeah, absolutely.
We got to
absolutely. And as you look forward to some of the playoff probabilities, I tweeted this out earlier, and a lot of the paths. I wanted to start with the paths of the championship level. Like you have been talking about the number 1 seed for a little while here. And as you look at the number 1 seed, it definitely takes a win out. There's really no other scenario that will get you in. There's some goofy scenarios with a Cincinnati win and maybe you lose to New England, maybe you lose to Chicago, something like that. There is a path there with another Chiefs losing to a lesser Seattle team, or, we've seen the Chiefs struggle now for a few weeks, but they always seem to get it done. They always seem to get the leg fumble every single week. They just end up putting so much, Mike, I think they just put so much pressure on teams that they mess up themselves. You see good teams like the Chiefs do it. You hope that the Bills get to that level someday, that if they're struggling against a lesser opponent, say Chicago this week, that they'll make, Justin Fields, or they'll make a pivotal mistake late in the game because of the pressure of pulling off an upset. They just aren't there as a team yet. But you see that come out a lot. And I think there's a lot to do with how good the Chiefs actually are and kind of that intimidation factor that they lay into you, more so than even their game plan script, which they've struggled. They had to come back. They let up a tie. They went into overtime, punted in overtime, which we haven't seen. And then they could have lost on a field goal, not even on a touchdown. That's truly remarkable to take the last place team to overtime with a chance to lose on a field goal.
And then handed the game.
That's not how I want to be in December if I'm Kansas City. They don't lose in December, though, Mike, ever. Like under Mahomes, ever.
That's
They've
the
only
thing.
lost.
Kansas City wins all those games, even when they play their worst. They find ways. I know it didn't happen against Cincinnati, but that was a true toss-up game.
Yeah.
It seems like Kansas City can get away with playing down to their opponents when they recovered that fumble in overtime. I was just shaking my head. That was a great opportunity for Houston to pull off the upset of the season, maybe the upset of the last couple of years, and they blew it in the end, unfortunately.
You saw it though. After that punt, I was like, there's still this chance that either they're going to punt back, and I was actually, even though a tie wouldn't have helped the Bills because they have the tiebreaker, so it really wouldn't have done much in the sense of the Bills have, if they're even anyways, they would have won on a tiebreaker of head to head. So the tie didn't really do anything. I just would have loved to see a tie in that situation. That's kind of what I was rooting for.
It would have been funny. One of the best teams tying one of the worst teams, but wasn't meant to be. I will say this. I understand why you're saying the Bills essentially have to win out to get that 1 seed. You have some numbers. I've been using the New York Times playoff simulator. Those numbers are a little bit different than the numbers you've been posting. I do think your numbers are probably a little bit closer to being accurate, but New York Times does show if the Bills win against the Bears and the Patriots and lose on the road at Cincinnati, that they still have a 45% chance at getting the 1 seed. And I think what their simulator is taking into account is that the Bengals are still likely to lose one of their 3 remaining games. They do play the Patriots this week, which is a possible loss. I know the Bengals are much better than the Patriots, but New England does have a solid defense. Sometimes those type of teams can give Cincy some trouble. And the Bengals closed their season playing Baltimore. So there is a possibility for a loss for Cincinnati there. I think what that also factors in is that Seattle or maybe the Raiders can sneak up and maybe steal one from Kansas City. I'm with you. I don't think the Bills will get the 1 seed if they lose one of these 3 remaining games, because I don't think Kansas City will lose another game this season. I'm not saying that they won't. They definitely, the way they've played the last couple of weeks, they're more than capable of losing one of these games, especially to a Raiders team on the road at the end of the season. If Las Vegas actually comes to play, I think we both look at the Raiders and think they're much better than their record is. They had an unfortunate start, losing a bunch of close games that they really shouldn't have. But it's all going to come down to that Cincy game for Buffalo. Even before we break down this Bears game, I think you and I both are writing that up as a win. I think we'd both assume that New England will likely be a win in the season finale. So essentially what it's going to come down to is a coin flip game on the road, primetime, Monday Night Football. And what are we going to see against the Bengals? Are the Bills corners going to be able to contain the trio of star wide receivers for Cincy, or are they going to go off? And the answer to that will end up determining if the Bills are the 1 seed or not.
Got some good stuff on that next week. We'll probably bring on another Cincy guest, maybe for 30 minutes of our show next week, working on a couple of things. So we'll have a couple of things brewing on that. I have some ideas where the zone coverage may come in handy as preferred to the Dolphins matchup that just happened, where zone coverage, no bueno, going over the top, Jalen Waddle being able to easily beat zone, and it confused Damar Hamlin versus Dane Jackson down the left side of the field. Confusion in cover 3 led to a big play. Blame whoever you'd like on that specific zone, but they were able to pound it, and then they missed on press man coverage. You saw Tyreek Hill, crazy video of him motioning, moving, jetting back, jetting forward. Should have been an illegal formation. He was not set at all. Maybe comes to the reason of Trey White missing on his press man, and then being able to hit Tyreek Hill over the top. Though Trey White is not a press man corner. He's not good. He's not particularly a man coverage corner. He's okay at it, but he's obviously made his dime, made his living on being a really great cover 2, cover zone a coverage corner. He's really good at break on the ball. He has really good instincts. He tackles usually fairly well. All the things that McDermott looks for in a Bills defensive back, and Trey White has those. But you saw him out of place in a more of a traditional press man that beats the Dolphins. He whiffed on the press. Tyreek Hill you saw Tua look the other way, seemingly to fake maybe Trey White, maybe a linebacker, had him anyways, because Trey had fallen, and then able to win on that after a Cam Lewis roughing the punter. You hate to see that and continue this whole scenario, but, as Dolphins fans like to complain about the calls, maybe I'm not sure which one bothers them the most. They've been complaining all week, but they also got a touchdown on an illegal motion where Tyreek Hill was like, did you see the video, Mike? He's a 1 yard past the line of scrimmage. Then he jumps backwards and he's like wiggling. And then finally they snap that. Like, it's insane. Like, I don't know how that play stood.
But
there's equal.
Yeah, I missed that, but do want to comment. The Dolphins fan base is soft. Think about all the crap they gave Bills fans after their week 3 win. And then they lose it all. A tough game. And then it's all the excuses in the world from them. I respect this Dolphins team, but it's hard to give them praise on social media because if you say anything nice, they're talking about themselves as one of the favorites to make a run in the playoffs. And if you have any criticism for them, they jump on you. The fan base is just not living with reality. I've been saying all year during the offseason that I thought Tua would have a top 10 to 15 season as a quarterback. And honestly, I got a lot of hate from Bills fans for saying that. Tua's been even better than I expected. And still, I feel like if I tweet anything out praising him, people are going to be laughing if he's not considered in the MVP conversation if you're a Dolphins fan. So that fan base does have to learn to be a little bit better with their expectations and how they react to these situations. I understand they haven't been a consistently good football team in recent years, but you got to be able to control that a little bit better. And that's something for all fan bases, but they've been talking down the Bills quite a bit this year. And it's laughable because the Bills are 11-3 overall and the top team currently in the AFC. So the Dolphins are right where I think most of us would have expected before the year, 8-6, and they're going to have a battle these last 3 weeks just to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and for as bad as the Bills have played, they're still better. Like people had this. I had to get into this, Mike, where people had this conceived notion that the Bills are much better last year. Like they didn't go through that 2-4 stretch, like they were not 7-6, like would be 8-6 at this point. Like at some point, it's a matter of they were 8-6, and obviously they want to win 9-6, 10-6, etc. But they were going through a few things last year too. They had lost to Jacksonville, a bad Jacksonville team, not even the Jacksonville team you see
blown out against the Colts.
Blown out against the Colts in a similar sleet, rain, wind game that you saw this year against the Jets. Very similar. The Bills actually went and found a way to lose that game on a defensive running the ball type of situation against Indianapolis last year. So there's these situations, obviously, a fool's gold Tampa team who got bounced early in the playoffs and now are terrible. They did have a better offense than they do this year, but they still basically buried the Bills for a half, and then something switched where the Bills absolutely played good football.
I think it's understandable why there is this narrative that maybe the Bills were better last year. And a lot of it is because when the Bills won, they were destroying their opponents. A lot of people forget that they were 7-6, like you mentioned, late in the season. And what the Bills did in the playoffs was nothing short of almost being perfect on offense. So when they lost because of a poor in-game coaching decision when they should have had the game won against what I considered the best team in the NFL last year. So people remember how it ended, not how things were going through the course of the season. And there were so many one-score losses that a lot of people, I think, in their heads believe that last year really should have been a 14-3, 15-2 type year. While this year, it started out with a lot of blowout victories, but it's been a lot of close games in the week since. But you are right. The metrics really don't back up the narrative that this team has regressed. If anything, the offense has been more consistent this year. They are higher in the metrics than they were last year. Josh Allen, I believe, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it was 36 touchdown passes, 15 interceptions last year. He had quite a few turnovers, and a lot of the deeper numbers had him not even as a top 5 quarterback for the regular season. He was more of that 7, 8, 9. We remember the playoffs and how he dominated then. But over the course of the regular season last year, he got touchdowns, he got yardage, but he wasn't consistently great. Now, there was some elements, whether that played a role and some other factors. But overall, Josh has been pretty elite this year so far. He is higher overall in those metrics. And defensively, yes, they were number 1 in a ton of categories last year, but they were beating up on a lot of backup quarterbacks, a lot of poor offenses. You look at this year, they've had a very difficult schedule. Their strength of victory is the best in the NFL. So they're winning these games against quality opponents. They already have wins against Kansas City, which is the 2 seed. You have a win over Tennessee, the 4 seed. You have a win over Baltimore, the 5, the Jets, New England, Miami. So you go on and on. The Bills have basically beaten every team in playoff contention in the AFC outside of Cincinnati, and they're going to have that opportunity on Monday Night Football. So the narrative doesn't really match the reality, and I think a lot of that is the close games, is the struggle sometimes with the run game, the struggles sometimes in the red zone with things not coming easy to them. But another good comment by Roy, 11-3 with a boatload of injuries. This team is battling. They're finding ways to win. And I said it last week on the show. Sometimes it's the battling through adversity. It's winning these close games that really reveal what you're capable of more than these blowout dominant wins. Yeah. This is a team that's finding ways to win football games in a plethora of different ways. Against Baltimore, they came back. Against Miami, down 8 late, they found a way to hold the Dolphins to a field goal to not make it a 2-score game. Then after getting the tying touchdown, they find a way to hold them at the 40, force a punt, get a 5.5-minute long drive, end it with a field goal. This is the type of football through the course of the year that gives you the confidence that you can win in any scenario in the playoffs. Winning by blowout is great in the regular season, but things are tough in the playoffs. So I'm actually encouraged that the battles that this team is going through is going to help them in the long run.
Yeah, and as you look through this, kind of unpack this situation of what the Bills have done to date, Mike, I tweeted this out early. You alluded to it. 5-1 against AFC playoff teams. Only loss being a crazy weathered backup against Miami in a situation we've already talked much about. And the chance to go 6-1 with the possibility of, depending how this playoff shakes out, them beating every single one of the AFC playoff teams. You have a situation to where, and right in front of you, you can win Chicago and then beat Cincinnati, and then maybe not even be playing for anything in New England if you get one favorable KC result, either way, against Denver or against this week against Seattle. The next thing you know, you're up a game and you have the tiebreaker, obviously, over everyone else. You're clinched. So that's a scenario where in week 18 we could be talking to Mark Schofield with nothing on the line. In week 18 for the Bills. Do they sit players? What is New England doing? Do the Bills sit player and help New England make a playoff spot? I mean, there's a plethora of things that could happen, all the way down to the Bills needing that game to be maybe, if things go real south, to even win the division. Because if they drop a couple games, Miami wins a couple games, they might need that New England game. Obviously, that's not likely, but these are scenarios the Bills can win 2 games here and maybe not even need the third game. That's the kind of position that they're in this year as compared to last year. They really did need to win out, quite literally, to win the AFC East last year. That's not a joke.
Possible. I mean, it is possible. We could be going into next week with beat Cincy and you clinch the 1 seed. If you can get Kansas City to lose to Seattle, I know it's not likely. Seattle is 9.5-point underdogs. We're probably not going to see it, but this Seahawks team isn't horrendous. They're much better than what the Houston Texans are. And Geno Smith has been,
and they're playing for the playoffs too
this year. So Seattle's playing for something. They're trying to make the playoffs. So this is important to them. I'm not going to put money on Seattle, but it could happen. And then you look at Cincinnati playing the Patriots, kind of one of those other situations where it could happen. I'm not going to put my money on the Patriots, but they have a quality defense. They should be able to slow down the Bengals offense enough to where it could be a competitive matchup. Can Mac Jones, can the Patriots offense make enough plays to get a win? What gives me a little bit of hope in both of those contests is it's must win for Seattle and New England. They lose those games, they're 7-8, and their road to the playoffs is very difficult for both teams. So you're going to get the best effort for both of those opponents, while the Bills theoretically should have an easier matchup this week. And even with, like we said, with Cincy, they had that Baltimore game waiting later on. So with the Bills right now, just take it 1 week at a time. I think if you would have said 3-4 weeks ago, the Bills are going to win out and get the 1 seed, we would have probably said, yeah, it's possible, but not very likely. But when you take that 1 week at a time approach, it becomes more realistic. And now we've put all these wins together to where there really is only one huge hurdle in front of them right now. And the Bengals, who are actually dealing with some injuries of their own. I saw the one comment from RJ saying that he thinks that it's going to be a little bit difficult this year because of these injuries. The injuries definitely play a role in if the Bills will make a run or not. But I still don't think their injuries are at the point where I'm going to change my expectations for can they win the Super Bowl or not. I still have all the faith that this team has the players to win it all. The Von Miller injury, that definitely hurts. But we forget this is a D-line that was able to get pressure last year without Von. They had some issues in the crucial moments, but they still have some guys on that line. They still have a great linebacking core. It's a secondary that's kind of turned into the concern. But as long as you have Josh Allen behind center, the dream is alive. I'm not in a situation where you lose one player other than Josh Allen, and I'm worried about how it's going to play out. As long as Josh Allen is taking snaps, this team is going to have a chance to make a run and possibly win a Super Bowl.
What's interesting, too, is as you look at the Bills defense, and we've seen some fumble luck things, and what are some things that are going, like some things that are preventing them from actually taking the next step? They've actually had 9 fumble takeaways, right? And they've given the ball away 10 times. So in theory, that's not too bad of a fumble ratio. You have teams like, for instance, Dallas, who has 14 fumble recoveries, and they've only lost 3. That's lucky. That's incredibly lucky. Anything would point to that being fumble luck. It's quite, frankly, really ridiculous that the way that that's played out for like in those situations. You know, Miami, for instance, would only they're not too far off, but theirs isn't as bad. They're actually only taking it away 8 times, and they've only given it away 6. So theirs isn't as bad as it seems. It kind of flipped the last couple of weeks between that fumble touchdown as well as them recovering one Bills Josh Allen fumble, the Bills not recovering Tua's. The next thing you know, that could have played a role.
You can't bank on that in the playoffs.
No,
that's one of those things where
either
if you
team
have that luck in the regular season.
No,
I'm going to think maybe you're not as good as what your record is. So the fact that you said the Bills is pretty even, what we're seeing is a true representation of what the Bills are. I don't think the Bills have had tremendous luck or unlucky situations for the most part. I feel like it's kind of playing out the way it should. The injuries, the volume of the injuries has been probably the most unfortunate thing for the Bills. But even with their injuries, obviously Micah Hyde being out for the year, Von Miller being out for the year.
Maybe he's not, Mike. He's looking like
maybe you're right. Those were the 2 major losses, but they've been lucky that Josh Allen was able to play through his injury. Jordan Poyer was able to return. Matt Milano's been able to play through his injury. Tremaine Edmonds has been able to come back. The key defensive linemen have been able to come back outside of Von Miller. So, yes, they've had a lot of injuries, but I don't know if that's going to significantly impact them when it comes to playoff time, unless another player or 2 are out long-term or get hurt between now and then. The Mitch Morse injury, definitely something to keep our eye on in concussion protocol. If he is out for an extended period of time, yes, that's a concern. But I don't want to comment on that yet because we don't know the severity of that situation. The Bills are not going to tell us much about the concussion and where he sits. Typically, when you're in protocol, it's no comment. We'll let you know when he's cleared. If he's cleared, he'll play. If he's not cleared, he's going to continue to sit out. So realistically, the concerns that we have with this team, I think you would agree with me, is how is this offensive line going to improve and be able to develop some type of run game, especially if Mitch Morse is possibly out, because they have had issues running it at times. Sometimes the pass protection doesn't get it done. Do they have a number 2 go-to target behind Stephon Diggs that they can feel comfortable with? And then the major things are defensively. Can they generate a pass rush when it's necessary to get a pass rush? And can the secondary hold up with Trey not being able to play like his old self at this point, and Dane Jackson being relied on as your number 2 corner? Those are my biggest worries. But even every team has concerns like that. You still have Josh Allen, and if you can score 30 points, you're going to have a chance in every game. So it really comes down to, can you score when it matters the most? And I'm going to bet on the Bills against the majority teams that they will come out on top.
So DVOA update, we like to give one, actually some funny DVOA stats this week. Bills jumped back to a commanding number 1 position after that performance, after that really strong, according to DVOA, offensive performance. 32.6% overall factor. They're 32.6% better than the mean. Number 1 overall in the league in DVOA. Like we said last week, they were 0.1 behind Philly. Philly dropped badly after a pretty poor game against Chicago. Now Jalen Hurts is hurt. And will that affect his MVP bid, thus pushing up Mahomes and Allen? Really, we'll have to see. 3.6% now behind the Bills, which was really funny about these stats, Mike, as we all moaned and groaned. Obviously, the defensive DVOA took a ding, one slot lower. Okay, to be expected. The special teams went up 1%. I have to imagine that's due to Tyler Bass's kicks and his performance on field goals and what they're able to do in certain situations, because the special teams, is a very poor. They actually are now 2nd in the league in special teams DVOA. They're up to 11.5 projected wins, which means they're playing worse. They're actually playing better than their ranking, which is funny. They could have an estimated 12 wins potentially in this season. So there's a lot to really like about some of their advanced metrics, as well as, obviously, I didn't mention their offense. 4th, they've moved up to 4th overall best offense in the league. 4th offense, 5th defense, 2nd special teams, equals 1st in the NFL in DVOA. So there's definitely some things to really enjoy from their advanced metrics. And then, like I've always said, Miami 11.6 are 3rd of the Bills DVOA. DVOA thinks they're a fair bit better than the Miami Dolphins based on DVOA. And to kind of counter this all up, Chicago is 29th with a minus 20% in the DVOA numbers. It's not looking good there in Chicago right now. That weighted DVOA is 29, so there's not even any factors there to point to. Offense has been okay, 22nd. We've seen worse offenses in the league. 31st DVOA. That defense prior to the Eagles game was terrible. They moved up from 32 to 31 after the Philly performance. They played fairly well in that. Philly didn't look like they're kind of looking like they weren't playing for much in that game to me, even though they were a little bit, and barely escaped that, even though, Philly still kind of felt like that was never really.
Well, I mean, Philly, they have so much wrapped up, and they essentially have that 1 seed already wrapped up, where these games, you don't want them to overlook opponents, but you can't blame them if they really do, especially a team like Chicago, one of the bottom teams in their conference. But looking at the DVOA, Kev, what's even more impressive, because DVOA to me is my go-to metric for evaluating teams. I think it is one of the best resources out there for determining how talented teams are. DVOA would be one of those metrics I would tell you, pick the Lions over the Vikings. Your average fan is going to look at the records and say the Vikings should be favored by a lot. You look at DVOA, it tells you another story. And when you look at who the Bills have played in these recent weeks, going back to Cleveland, DVOA 14th. That was a game that we didn't think was going to be a huge struggle, but good win. Then you follow it up with Detroit Detroit is now 9th in DVOA. They have won 6 of their last 7 games. The Lions are on fire. That Bills game was tough, but they found a way to win on the road on Thanksgiving. You follow it up, the Jets, 10th in DVOA. Miami, 8th in DVOA. So you have 3, and then even the Patriots, you have them in 12th in DVOA. So in the last 5 weeks, the Bills have beaten the 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th, 14th overall teams in the metrics. And we're talking about not you and me, but the media is talking about why are they playing in close games? Well, they're playing in close games because they're playing some really good football teams. They're being challenged. If anything, this is going to help them because these are the type of opponents they're going to be playing in the playoffs. I'm not saying any of those teams are world beaters, but when you're looking at Miami, Detroit, the Jets, New England, you're talking about there might be 2 or 3 playoff teams among that group when it's all said and done. So I do believe there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about this recent stretch. The Chicago's the first game since, I don't know, maybe Green Bay, where you're really playing in Green Bay is not even bad. At the time, obviously, we thought they were going to be better. But the first game since early part of the year where you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, this is probably a team that we should win pretty comfortably against. So outside of Minnesota, which obviously was just a blown second half, but this is a game that the Bills really should dominate. I know the wind chill is supposed to be -11. I know weather is going to be a factor. But when you're asking yourself, what do the Bills do against every opponent that they face against opposing offenses? They find a way to try to take away their strength. The Bears can't throw the ball. All the Bears offense is right now is Justin Fields going on these insane runs and scrambles, eluding everybody. The Bills' entire game plan is going to be keep Fields from doing something insane. I don't have faith in the Bears passing attack that they're going to be able to push the ball. I don't think the Bears running game outside of Fields is that tremendous either. So maybe the weather will limit the Bills offense a little bit, but I don't know if the Bears offense is going to be able to do anything this Saturday. We'll see how the weather is, but I really can't see this Bears offense doing anything. And their defense is one of the worst in football. If it wasn't for the storm, if this was a neutral field inside a dome, we're picking the Bills by 20 points in this game.
Right. And if you look at the Bears, kind of how they play football, right? They're missing receivers up and down. So the Bills are going to be able to mix and match there, be able to focus on the run. I mean, they have David Montgomery. You're going to have Herbert back coming off of IR this week. So they're going to try to effectively, especially if there's weather and elements and wind and chill, they're going to run the ball, Mike. I mean, and straight up what they're going to do. The Bills aren't going to use this cover 2 shell game plan that they used against, say, Miami and KC and maybe Cincinnati. They're definitely going to be using that New England Jets game plan.
The Bills were daring Miami to run the ball. They dare Kansas City to run the ball.
That's what they are doing, yeah.
And yes, it looks bad, but that doesn't mean the Bills can't stop the run. There's a reason why when the Bills went up against the Titans, why the Bills, when they go up against the Browns this year, hold Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb to essentially nothing. And it's because they know those teams are likely not going to beat the Bills if they go in the air. So they target the run offense there. And when they target it and the game plan for it, they shut it down. Against Miami, you need to stop Tyreek Hill. You need to stop Jalen Waddle. The weather did not have any impact on the game Saturday night. So the Bills essentially said, Miami, you know what? We don't want to allow 5-6 yards per carry, but if you're going to be patient and run the ball, credit to you. And you know what ended up happening? Miami got impatient late. They started going to the air, and it ended up being just enough on defense for the Bills to hold on to the win.
You're baiting them to use Raheem Mostert to beat you. And I believe the Bills felt pretty comfortable that Raheem Mostert wasn't going to be able to beat the Buffalo Bills and their offense, and he wasn't. And credit to Mike McDaniel, he knew that too. Like, the stats might look good running the ball. We feel pretty good. We wasted some time. We were kicking field goals at times. The Bills tightened up in the red zone. But Raheem Mostert isn't the key to beating anybody in the NFL. He's a nice supplemental piece. Wasn't even seeing the rock over Edmonds earlier this year, who was then traded to Denver. Then he's obviously still behind a guy they traded for midseason in Jeff Wilson Jr., who was hurt before this game. So Raheem Mostert wasn't going to be the reason that the Dolphins won the football game. The Bills would gladly take that for 200 yards of Tua passing. And for the most part, Tyreek Hill being taken out of the game outside of one Trey slip / pre-motion weirdness. And then one beater by Jalen Waddle over cover 3 that, someone missed their assignment. So beside a couple of those situations, the Bills feel pretty good about how they were able to shut down the pass early and often in that game. And we're really one of the best at preventing and slowing down some of the team's best weapons. Best weapon, Nick Chubb, shut him down. Best weapon, Derrick Henry, shut him down. So the Bills focused on shutting down the Jets run game 2 weeks ago, and they did. They shut down the Jets run game. They let up a little bit here and there to Garrett Wilson, but they gladly figured that Mike White wasn't going to beat him on his own. They were right. He was unable to beat him, thus knocking him out of the game. So you kind of look at this from a lot of angles, and, we're going to have Lorin Cox on from Locked On Bears shortly. He's coming on the show at 8 p.m. sharp, so stay here for Bears news. We're going to get it from his perspective. We're going to get it, one of the best Bears shows out there. They're going to bring us what that offensive line's been doing. I know there's been some hot topics in that situation. So he's going to be coming on the show to break down his thoughts and analysis on the Bears' future and how it pertains this weekend in this rigid, does this game stay on Saturday? Obviously we'll see how this all plays out with timing, situation, location, and all that. We'll kind of ask Lorin his opinion on that. Obviously, as a Bills, we cover the Bills. They have moved, a couple times in the past history. Anything's possible that if the NFL wants to get this game in, they want players to be safe. We'll see what ends up happening.
I don't think they're going to move it, quite frankly. There's a lot of areas that are going to be dealing with this. They would have to move a bunch of games if they consider moving this. It's one of those where they're not going to move it to Christmas. Especially with them having 3 games already. I think they're just going to have to deal with it, Kev. I know it doesn't look good and it's going to be brutal, but the NFL they play through brutal conditions. As long as the Bills can safely get there and it doesn't impact travel, they're going to play this game. I think when you look at the Bills situation, it was impossible for you to get more than 10,000 fans at that game in Buffalo if the Bills were going to host Cleveland. Yeah. If they can get the fans to the game, I can't see them moving it.
That's the big thing. Can they get the fans to the games? Can they get the players there safely? There's a couple of factors in this. We'll see how it all plays out. I agree that it's most likely not to be moved, but there are scenarios where I think that things could get interesting, and they're calling this to be pretty bad, though, not just.
It's more so the wind, right? Because I haven't been hearing much about the actual snowfall. There's a lot of. It's been hard to find clarity. They're saying this could be one of the worst storms in decades based on the early models. But what does that mean? What is it going to be? Crazy wind? Is it going to be snowfall? Is it? Obviously, we know it's going to be cold. I think we're all just waiting for that extra information. I believe it was Daquan Jones was on the show earlier today, and he was asked if he had heard anything, and he said nothing has been talked about inside the Bills' facilities about the game potentially getting moved yet. But that was also the case when the Cleveland game on Tuesday, and then 2 days later they decided to move that game. So we'll see, Kev. I'm not going to bet on that. I don't know if you think that's a realistic possibility or not, but where would they move it? That's the question. It's
Detroit. I mean, right?
Does Detroit have a game on?
No.
At home? Okay. Well, I guess we'll see. And with the weather, assuming the game is played in Chicago, the one thing everybody will talk about is which team can run the ball better, which team is going to be better on the ground. And one thing I do think is important to talk about the Bills, especially with the talk of the Bills' run defense, is DVOA. They are still number 3 in the NFL stopping the run. Chicago Bears are 27th. everybody talks about how Fields is an unbelievable runner, and he has 1,000 yards rushing on the year. Josh Allen's over 700. So I really don't think, even if it is bad weather, that it is disadvantaged Bills, especially going up against a weaker run defense. You got Josh Allen as your quarterback. I think regardless of the weather, the Bills have quite the advantage going into this matchup.
Yeah. They've had some running backs in and out of the lineup. Herbert's been hurt for, a good chunk of change here. There was some breaking of runs by Justin Fields has obviously elevated that number. Their offensive line's pretty poor. We're going to hear from Lorin here in 10 minutes to kind of break down their offensive line and where the plus matchups are for the Bills and what he's thinking about for this situation. They're very much in play for the number 2 overall pick. We'll see how much motivation that they have outside of Fields of getting out of that range. So there's a couple of really funny storylines in this one. And then obviously Minnesota is the other one that could, fuel the game with their dome if they had to this upcoming week. So we'll see if there's anything going on with any movement of games. But we don't know anything as far as movement. Like you said, Mike, they're not going to movement. But if it is a really, really bad storm, can the teams get there? Do situations make sense? There's a lot that goes involved in.
There was a Bills game back during the drought where they ended the season against the New England Patriots, where there were 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts in Buffalo. It's a famous game. I believe the Patriots might have won 16-0 or something like that. But it was a game where the field goal attempts were literally moving 30 yards to the right, 40 yards to the right. I believe there was an extra point miss back when the extra points were much shorter than what they are now because of the wind actually held up the ball and brought it down. And before the game, back when the Bills had a lot of the rocky areas still, there were stones that were lifted that actually smashed through windows of some vehicles. So the NFL does its best to keep games on their allotted time and location as long as other situations don't pop up. And yes, like I said, I would have assumed before the 6 feet of snow that the NFL was probably trying their best to keep that Cleveland game in Buffalo. It just did not become a realistic option. The tough part about this is if we're talking about a foot of snow, how do you cancel a game in Chicago because of a foot of snow when you even if it was 60-mile-per-hour winds, which is really crazy, is what's the sustained winds? What is the constant winds going to be? I don't know if you're going to have enough information to really cancel a game like this ahead of time, because this isn't like a hurricane or a blizzard in Buffalo where you're getting that high accumulation of snow. We know it's going to be bad, but do we have enough? Does the NFL have enough information to be proactive? That's the whole thing. You move the game and then the storm doesn't live up to the expectation. You got 2 really upset teams and organizations in that situation. So it's a complicated situation until there's more clarity. And I don't know if this is one of those storms that we're really going to have much clarity before it actually takes place.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be bad on Friday. I mean, that's no doubt about it. I don't know. Friday would be a legitimate argument to move a game. Saturday, I think it's going to be more clear. I don't see as much of that wind. I don't see any snow. I just see it being cold. It might be a lot like that Bills New England playoff game from last year.
Do the Bills leave early? If the issue is Friday,
you can't leave Friday. You lose practice. That's not fair. I don't know. That's not just a standard just leave and leave early.
Because you either have to if it's Friday into Saturday, that makes the travel kind of one of the biggest concerns, because there's really no leaving early Saturday for Saturday afternoon.
I don't see why they can't move the game to Sunday. I know it's Christmas Day, so there's 3 other games. I think it was people on the beat.
With the holidays, then
how about this? People on the beat in Rochester. I was listening to Danger and Battagular on the sports bar in Rochester, and they mentioned Thad on, and Thad mentioned that they're planning already on having to drive. He said drive on Christmas Eve and miss both holidays because the game would be on Christmas Day. So the local media is sensing something with that situation to where that could possibly be an alternative to where I think the wind and the elements team can get in there Saturday and play Sunday. Unfortunately, yes, they would sacrifice, media would, the players would sacrifice both holiday days. They are expecting to be able to be home and celebrate Christmas with their families. But, that may not happen in a situation to where they're unable to leave. I do think the Bills might prefer that to leaving to Thursday, and they might have an argument to not having enough practices in on a short week. We'll see what happens with this, or maybe the next day. I would assume you'd find out nothing will come out of the weather and elements, but the Bills are prepared for it. Mike, what I wanted to talk about, Lorin, in 5 minutes here, we're going to get into that, some of the game flow stuff. The Bills are ready. You saw the Bills actually play better when Josh Allen figured out he could cut through the wind against the Patriots, and were moving the ball fairly well in the Buffalo win game of 2021. You saw them play really well in negative temperatures in the wild card round against the Patriots last year. So, and then you saw them take over the game against Miami when the snow happened. Miami was dead in the water. When that snow happened, I was like, that's plus Buffalo in this situation. You would think, Mostert was running all over. That snow totally affected the game. I still think you heard from Dorsey today say we had 2 game plans, which I figured, and we had to utilize the standard game plan. We pulled that one out right before the game. Well, it showed that it was a slow first quarter in certain ways, and it certainly showed that they switched their game plan, in my personal opinion. I think that they were preparing for a snow game plan. You saw tight end usage. You saw multiple running back usage. You saw Josh Jordan, no touchdowns to wide receivers. You saw a Dawson Knox game. You saw a lot of things, Mike, that pointed
I would have wanted to see either way. I mean,
maybe, but that had to do with the weather.
Yeah, it definitely had something to do with the weather. But to me, that's an encouraging sign that Dawson Knox did finally get involved. He did have a couple, from my vantage point, drops that were a little disappointing. I didn't see the TV camera angles, so I'm not sure if they were tough to catch or if he just had the one on the sideline and then the one over the middle. But what I would say is bringing Cole in late in the season, not having used Dawson Knox as much as what many fans would have expected this year. Is it possible that Dorsey and the Bills are holding on to these things for the playoffs? Is there stuff that they've been keeping for advantages when it gets to the postseason? I don't want to assume that that's 100% the case, because it'd be kind of odd to hold on to something for an entire season just to be like, oh, it's cold weather, playoff time, let's get Dawson Knox involved a ton now. But it does make you wonder, how much of the Bills' offense have they been running? How much are they saving for bigger moments? It is really interesting when you look at Dawson Knox's numbers following this game. He's really not that far off from what he was last season. Obviously, he did that, I think, in 15 games last year. The big area where he's regressed is touchdowns. Obviously, he was incredible in the red zone last year. But if you look at receptions and total yardage, Dawson Knox is probably going to end up right around where he was last season. So that is kind of interesting to me, because it feels like it's been such a quiet year, and it's because he hasn't had many dominant games. But in the end, he has 40-plus receptions right now. He's going to end with 50-plus receptions. He's going to be around 550 yards. It's kind of that expectations. I think when you get 10 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns, you think of him as a premier tight end, when the reality is Dawson Knox has probably always been more of a 5 to 12 tight end in the league the last couple of years, more so than being a top 5 tight end, that we might have elevated those expectations of him to an unrealistic level entering this year.
And we have Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears coming on here momentarily still to break down this game. We wanted to quickly bring you an update from one of our preferred partners, BetUS, right before we get Lorin in here to really break down. And it's Christmas time here. It's holiday season. May have a giveaway for you here today. Stay tuned for what that might look like. As we were really happy that everyone's here talking with us. I see some Bears fans in the chat room. So it's definitely been quite the atmosphere here.
Hey guys, Cover One is excited to announce our new partnership with BetUS. BetUS has a live wagering on all major games, the best betting variety in the business, and an easy deposit and withdrawal process with the fastest payouts in the industry. Our loyal Cover One fans get a choice between 2 exclusive offers, either a 125% sign-up bonus on your first deposit up to $2,500 or a free $50 bet with no deposit required. Just use promo code COVER1 on the links provided in the show description below. BetUS, where the game begins.
Special message from our partner, BetUS, as Lorin will be with us any moment. Mike, we're going to get into Chicago more in depthly. It's going to be a fun one. I would like to hear about, the Bills only play Chicago every 4 years. Obviously, you get that new crossover NFC game based on where you finish in the standings. Obviously, the Bills and the Bears won't finish anywhere in the same standings close right now, at least for a little while Minnesota and obviously Green Bay's there. Even Detroit's on the rise. So we'll see if Chicago's ever able, but it's going to be every 4 years for now. We're going to see what they're thinking, potentially holding the second overall pick. How hard are they going to play in these elements? This isn't a playoff game. This isn't even Belichick and his crazy schemes, Matt Eberflus. What's going to happen, even if they do get the elements? I don't think that necessarily gives the Bears any benefit in this game. So it's going to be a very quite interesting performance.
Kev, we got an unfortunate super chat here. So we're going to show this from the Ghost of Judah tribe saying, oh, Kev, are you not showing it? Oh, you're clicking at the same time as me. Cover One, y'all getting destroyed Saturday. Jay Allen sucks. First off, that's tremendous grammar. Appreciate that comment. Second of all, it's going to be great when the Bears get absolutely hammered on Saturday afternoon. And then I enjoy the rest of my Christmas Eve with my family, opening gifts, enjoying my Christmas, playing some pool, and having no stress this entire weekend, because what I know is that is not going to happen. I appreciate the donation to the show. That makes it even better.
Appreciate you, Judah.
Any other Bears fans out there that want to contribute to the show, we greatly appreciate it. We will display your comments. And like I said, we appreciate any contributions. So thank you, Gus to Judah, for the wonderful comment.
Yeah, appreciate you. I mean, hey, you have your opinion. I like you coming in. You're firing up the chat. We have a lot of counter arguments to you there, Judah, but we're gonna play them now before Lorin comes on the show. We got some laughing faces to that comment. We certainly have some people very interested. Hey, at least you super chatted that. Jen, that was his allowance. So
hey, we got to tell people while you're watching right now, please hit the like button. It's huge for us. Absolutely massive for the algorithm. We're trying to be more vocal about it in recent weeks. We really haven't hammered that for most of our podcast existence, but our Cover One guys want us to mention a little bit more. So any help you can get by liking that like button, we appreciate it. And make sure to comment not only in the live chat, but the regular chat. Helps the algorithm, helps us grow, helps the entire Cover One network, so we can continue providing content that you guys want. And before we have our guests on our show, I just want to show one quick video from the other day. Obviously, Tyler Bass had the game winner. We could show this because it's not actually NFL produced content. It's from the game, from a fan perspective, from my perspective in the 300 level. So just wanted to show this so people could get kind of the vibe inside of Highmark Stadium at the end of Saturday night's win over the Miami Dolphins.
Listen.
So just a quick little look, and now we got Lorin here. So ready to talk some more Bills, Kev. Let's get it started.
Well, as we've said today, we've kind of broken out a little bit from the Dolphins game. We've broken down some DVOA metrics, but now it's really time to dive into Bears talk and what the Bears may be doing and how their season looked to date. how it's going to look going forward, and very excited to kind of say what's going on in Chicago. Bills Bears only play every 4 years, so really interested to know how that looks as we welcome in Lorin Cox, Locked on Bears, as a former Locked on Bills host before Joe Marino. Very happy to have Lorin on the podcast. Very excited to know what the Locked On Network's been doing, really some big things across all of their shows. We hear them on local radio. We hear all the great ways that network's developed. So we're proud to have you, Lorin. Why don't you quickly tell us a little bit about yourself? And thank you so much for showing up. And I always like to ask, to start off with, why don't you tell us a little bit, not only about yourself, but give us a little breakdown on the Bears season to date.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. I've been doing Locked On Bears now for 5.5 years.
Yeah.
It's been a long time, and been covering the Bears longer than that, and writing around. And you in this industry, you kind of jump around a little bit here and there, and write for a number of different outlets, and take the whole podcast just talking about the places we've all been to before. But yeah, appreciate you having me on. And I don't know, it's a familiar place covering the Chicago Bears on a 3-win team late in the season, right? I mean, that's been a little bit too often what this team is like. Maybe not quite 7 losses in a row like this, but it's a rebuilding team. It's a rebuilding season. The Bears are definitely like not actively tanking in terms of like the coaching staff. They're not intentionally playing worse players or calling bad plays, or intentionally kind of phoning it in or mailing it in some of these situations. But when your general manager trades your best defensive player, Roquan Smith, at the trade deadline, and probably your second best player, Robert Quinn, also at the trade deadline, I mean, you can debate first and second and third and fourth, but 2 of your best players, there's sort of an organizational direction here right now that, yes, you're sort of tearing, it's like rebuilding a house, right? You're tearing it down to the foundations and kind of getting it real established, and then building back up from there. And we're still early in that process and figuring out who belongs for 2023 and beyond, and who's just here temporarily to collect a paycheck and fill a roster spot.
So my first thing for you, it's going into the year, the biggest question that most Bears fans, I would assume, wanted answered is Justin Fields a guy we can go forward with and have confidence in? Obviously, a little bit of a difficult first year as a rookie, but it hasn't come from the passing game, but his ability to make plays on the ground in any situation has been nothing short of remarkable. I know he had some legs at Ohio State, but we never saw this. There was never a mention that he could be a runner like Lamar Jackson or Michael Vick. Despite the losing, I would have to think that right now Bears fans are encouraged about what Fields has brought to the table. And like you said, even early in this rebuilding process, there has to be some confidence that he could be the guy, and he might have that special traits needed to build a roster around him.
Yeah, that's 100%, I think, where the fan base is coming from. Because when you look at the pure like volume production statistics, right, you're not seeing dominant passing from the Bears. I mean, I think they are dead last in the league in terms of passing yards. And Fields, 15 to 10 touchdown to interception ratio is not terrible by any means, but not anything to write home about. He's barely got 2,000 passing yards this season. He's not going to finish with big production that way. But you see not only the flashes of the running ability and I mean everything. I mean, he's 200 yards away from setting the NFL single season record this year. I think he needs basically 70 yards a game over these last 3 games to set that record. And he already set the Bears franchise record this season with still 3 games left and 1 missed to injury in there as well. But even in the passing game, the box score does not tell the full story there. Just the number of pass attempts, the Bears are last in the NFL. They just don't throw the ball nearly as much as other teams because they run the ball so effectively with Fields and also with David Montgomery and some of the talent that they have in the backfield. But we've seen enough from him as a passer that when they do give him the opportunities to load up and fire shots downfield, when the offensive line gives him anything close to a reasonable amount of time to throw the ball, and when his receivers can get any reasonable amount of open downfield, which doesn't happen all that often, but when it does happen, he's fully capable of taking advantage of every little window of opportunity that a defense can give him. And there's a high level of confidence that, you give him some offensive line improvements this offseason, a little bit better at wide receiver this offseason, and in theory, a much better defense, so he doesn't have to play from behind so much, that he can really take that. I don't want to say like Jalen Hurts level step, because it's not, you don't want to expect MVP kind of performance from him, but like that type of leap forward, maybe even Josh Allen like leap forward to like, okay, all of a sudden a same year, multiple years in the same system, and things can just kind of build up from that foundation around Justin Fields, there is that for sure confidence in no need to draft a quarterback, even if you're drafting maybe even second or third overall this year. Like, it's all about building around this guy for the future.
Now, tell me about, so I believe I saw you tweet this. Tell me about the Bears offensive line. I think you had a strand of interesting tweets that I was kind of reflecting on pre-show to produce my notes. Really interested to get your take on that. I think they have some guys in and out of the lineup. You had a bad neck injury last week. You had just guys that seem to be like you're rotating in all the time. I'm going to leave it to you. Why don't you tell us where it's at now? Because all we can do is look at advanced statistics or whatever, but that doesn't tell the complete story.
Yeah. So it's an offensive line that definitely run blocks better than it pass blocks. And when they can get themselves moving downhill a little bit more, they seem to just be, more in control. They got more strength. They've got more coordination that way to sort of, and I think all the ball carriers, Fields and Montgomery, are both pretty good at working off whatever the offensive line will give them. But pass protection has been varying levels of horrendous this season. I think we started to see some confidence in that group over a recent stretch of games. And then against the Eagles last week, I mean, they gave up 5 sacks in the first half. And I don't actually remember what the number came up to, but it was 7, 8, or 9 by the time the game was over with. And that wasn't just Justin Fields holding on to the ball too long. It was the right tackle, whoever was in there, was getting smoked pretty regularly. And even their stalwart, Cody Whitehair, had a pretty bad game. And now he shows up on the injury report with a knee injury all of a sudden. That he's played the whole game and didn't seem to leave or really be noticeably bothered by it, but he's missing practice. So clearly something is up there. And that's the even bigger concern this week, that even if the Bears offensive line was 100% healthy and full strength, you'd have some questions there. But now you also add in that you mentioned Tevin Jenkins taken to the hospital with a neck injury. The right tackle, Riley Reif, right now missed practice with an illness that presumably should be better from, but we don't know what the illness is there. And then Whitehair missed with a knee injury. So it's like, well, could you be down 2 or 3 starters on the offensive line when you really maybe only had 1 or 2 guys that you trusted in the first place? It's a potential disaster against a Bills pass rush that maybe isn't Eagles level good, but is still really, really darn good and is going to cause some real problems here. They've gone younger with that group up front. A rookie 5th round pick, Braxton Jones, has been pretty good for a rookie 5th round pick, but not a top flight left tackle by any means. The center, Sam Mustipher, is maybe the most disliked player on the team from the fan base perspective, that they just feel like he's not very good and needs to be upgraded and ideally wouldn't be starting, but they don't have a better option at this point. So it's messy up front. And I think Justin Fields relies on that group more than he does his wide receivers in terms of like which is more important to his success. He's not a quick rhythm passer. He's not a guy that wants to do a 3-step drop and throw the curl or the slant. Like, he needs time, play action, move the pocket, something so that the plays can develop a little bit more downfield and he can take those deeper shots, because he's a much better deep ball thrower and sees the field really well downfield. But if you're trying to get like quick rhythm footwork in the pocket, that's just not the style of quarterback he is. He's much more, the Cam Newton style of load up and fire type of quarterback than, a quick West Coast kind of get rid of the ball quickly kind of guy.
How come the Bears haven't been more aggressive surrounding Justin Fields with high level talent? I know Darnell Mooney has had success in the past last year, and that they brought in Chase Claypool. But you look at the numbers. The leading receiver right now is, I believe, Mooney with under 500 yards. And I understand the Bears don't like to go in the air too much, but that's a concern to me, that they really haven't given him more weapons. It feels like Josh Allen pre John Brown and Cole Beasley, when he was looking at guys like Zay Jones and Andre Holmes, players that at that time should not be your number 1, number 2, number 3 type wide receivers. And that's the one thing I am encouraged, that Fields has been able to get it done on the ground in spite of a lack of weapons, because I look back at what Josh did as a rookie, what he did in the second year. He did things on the ground, which really helped him kind of stay afloat, even when he was trying to learn the game and process things. Are the Bears going to be more aggressive in the future, bringing in a wide receiver to really help Fields out? And just looking at this game, I know weather is going to probably be a factor. So who knows if the passing game is even going to be something that we're going to need to worry about. But assuming that the weather wasn't in play, is there anybody on this Bears offense, wide receiver, obviously Cole Kmet, anybody that really could give the Bills secondary that's been struggling some issues.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag there where I think the Bears have some players that can do some things pretty well, but it's like they're not consistent enough to do it all the time. Like that's what can separate good from great players, is that plenty of players in the NFL are good enough athletes that they can house a play every once in a blue moon, but it's the truly special players that do it more often. Like consistency sometimes is more important than overall talent, because plenty of guys have talent, and that's where it becomes hard to answer, because like Chase Claypool has missed the last just last week, and I'm trying to think of his 2 games, but I think it's just 1 game so far with the knee injury, and was limited at practice on Tuesday. So we're not sure if he's going to be back or not. But I mean, we saw early in his career in Pittsburgh. I mean, he's 6'4", 230 pounds, and can run really fast. He's got the physical tools of kind of like a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. He doesn't usually play like a number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, but like he's shown some capabilities of doing so, just not very consistently. And so like, could he have a play here against a struggling Bills secondary? Absolutely. But we haven't really seen him do it much this season, but there's those flashes that you're like, well, at any given point, there's that threat, but you're not necessarily banking on it for the Chicago Bears. And you've got, Equanimeous St. Brown's likely going to be out with a concussion, and Byron Pringle came over from the Kansas City Chiefs. And, with Patrick Mahomes, he did some real damage there, but in that system, he's behind Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. I mean, he's at best the 3rd option in their passing game, and sometimes more like the 4th or 5th option. And it's a little bit easier to find some more open space in a secondary when they're not paying nearly as much attention to you. But if you're in Chicago, like last week, he's kind of their number 1 wide receiver because they didn't have anybody else. And, it's a little more quiet that way. He did get a touchdown, but he was kind of wide open on a busted coverage play that Fields found after extending the play with his legs. Like that's been the Bears' best weapon in the passing game has been Fields' legs, where he extends the play, gets out of the pocket, and something breaks down in coverage, and he keeps his eyes downfield, and all of a sudden a receiver is wide open, not because he ran a great route or because, the play call was some perfect coverage beater. It was just they couldn't, somebody came down to try and stop Fields from scrambling, and the coverage breaks down as a result, and he individually gets wide receivers open on his own. And those are the kind of things that Bears fans look at and say, oh, like they got their guy. Like this is the quarterback. And so that's more, to me, that's more the threat for the Bills defense. Like I was talking to Matt Waldman from the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. I don't know if he's an NFL drafted fantasy football guy. And he describes receivers often. Are they scheme players, or are they guys that can go like that sort of are, I don't remember how he words it, but like transcend scheme, like they win their one-on-ones. Like Cole Kmet is a guy, you can scheme him open, and if you run the offense to get him the ball, he can get you some production. Byron Pringle's the same way. I think Chase Claypool's a little more the same way, but the Bears don't have that guy that it's 3rd and 10 and you're going up against their best cornerback and you just need your guy to go make a play and beat their best guy. They don't have that, especially with Mooney on injured reserve and Claypool probably not at 100% if he even plays.
I got one on top.
That was
going
to be my question too.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I just got one quick thing to follow up. So with Justin Fields, is he obviously we talked about some of the issues with the offensive line last week against Philadelphia. What is his pocket presence? Is he looking to stay in the pocket, find a guy, wait till somebody gets open, or is he looking to run first time there's a person in his space? And to add on top of that, are the Bears scheming up run specific plays for him, or is this the result of making plays, scrambling, and just freelancing on the fly?
So I think pocket presence is the area of growth that maybe I've been, I don't want to say most encouraged about with Fields, because obviously the way he's run the ball but like in terms of like the important thing for him developing as a passer and a quarterback, from week 1 till now, I think his pocket presence has improved dramatically. And it seemed like the kind of thing that you need to be in a live game situation to truly get better at, because you just can't really practice real pass rushers that can actually hit you. You're not wearing the red jersey, or in Chicago they wear an orange jersey, but practice just doesn't have the live bullets and the lights and all the reasons that make a real football game real. And so over the course of the season, you've seen him be more patient in the pocket, be less quick to drop his eyes and become the runner. And I think now he's found, it's certainly not perfect, and there's still more development to be done there, but I think he's found a good middle ground here where he's very good at feeling what kind of pressure is coming. So he's pretty good at telling like, oh, like this pass rusher just whipped my right tackle and he's got a free run at me. I got to go. Like, I can't just a step above this and stay in the pocket, because this guy's, even if he misses the tackle, he's still going to be right there to bring me down. I got to run. But I think he's gotten better at realizing, like, okay, like my left guard is being beaten here, but if I sidestep it, my guard can follow him and block him a second time and sort of recover basically and give me, another extra second or two before I have to figure out what my next challenge here is in the pocket. So I think he's gotten a lot better at knowing when he has to flee and when he can hang in there a little bit longer. But the offensive line hasn't always given him very many opportunities to hang in a little longer, because he makes the first guy miss, and now another lineman is being beat, and now he has to flee. But that like fight versus flight, I think has as an instinct has gotten a lot better for him. And then it's also gotten better that when he does flee the pocket in previous games, he was much more inclined to just tuck it and run. And he would keep his eyes downfield, but you would rarely see him pull up and throw. But he's gotten a lot better at like, no, I am going to make the defense think I'm going to run. And sometimes I will run, but a lot of times I'm still looking for that open receiver, and will find that open receiver once the defense collapses because I have left the pocket. And as far as the quarterback designed running game, they've shifted back and forth on that a little bit. Pre-injury, he has a left shoulder, his non-throwing shoulder has a sprain in it from 3 or 4 weeks ago. Pre-injury, they were designing a lot of quarterback runs, sweeps and some bash option plays. Post-injury, they've cut back on that a little bit to try and limit the sort of damage he's going to take. You'll still see some read options and maybe the occasional like design quarterback keeper there, but I'm not expecting we haven't been seeing as much of that. But I don't know, maybe if it's a cold weather game against the Bills and the passing game's a little more limited that way, maybe it's something they try and go back to in this one.
If you sum it all up, and one thing to look forward to, how do you feel about, putting weapons around fields? But let's look at what you've done. How do you feel about potentially the 34th overall pick for Chase Claypool? Is that something you feel good about? Is that something you're like, well, we'll still wait and see, and then, kind of bring it all up to speed? You kind of alluded to it already. Do you expect him with a short year, season over? Do you expect to see him this week? And how do you feel about 34th potential overall pick?
Yeah. 34th makes that hard, right? I mean, in general, second round pick felt like a little bit of an overpay, because that's where the Steelers drafted him, and he wasn't necessarily playing up to that draft status. Now the Bears general manager made a good point after the trade, and kind of he didn't say it in these words, but reading between the lines, he essentially was saying, we looked at the free agent wide receiver class, and there's nothing there. I mean, the best free agent wide receivers are going to be like Juju Smith-Schuster and Allen Lazard. I mean, that's kind of what. So, you're looking at number 3 type, number 4 wide receivers, maybe borderline number 2s, depending on the offense. So he kind of looked at that and said, well, we're not going to the Bears are going to have $100 million plus in cap space, and they're not going to be able to blow that money on a wide receiver. So look to the trade market and go for a guy like Claypool, that certainly isn't a number 1 right now, but you feel like maybe there's some untapped potential and some upside there. And you get him in the building early now, as opposed to waiting and trading for him in the offseason. Now you get half a year to see some of what he does, and then another full season next year, and then he'll be a free agent after that. And I guess, if he hits free agency and signs somewhere else, you at least get a compensatory pick back to soften some of the load there. So it was a high risk trade, and I've been a little underwhelmed by Claypool, and I think it's not so far looking like it was worth the second round pick. But there were reports that other teams, including I think Green Bay, was also offering a second round pick for Claypool. And so, of course, the Bills took what they thought would be the better of the second round pick, or the Steelers took what they thought would be the better of the second round picks wisely. So like, it wasn't as though the Bears were the only team that just came in and gave some way overpay offer that someone else maybe was going to give up a similar pick. So the league seems to have some value for Claypool in that way that we're not really seeing it in Chicago. And I think there's probably a lower ceiling than maybe we would hope for Claypool, but still, you pair him with Darnell Mooney and you add another receiver in another sort of like not a true number 1, but another into that group. And all of a sudden, like in the offseason, and all of a sudden you feel like you got something you're working with there, because number 1 receivers just don't fall off trees. And it's unfortunately it's going to be challenging there. I certainly want to see him out there this week, because he just needs more time to learn the offense and get on the same page with Fields. And I'm willing to still be patient with him, because he's traded midseason, and the Bears ask their wide receivers to do a lot. And it takes a little while to get on that same page with a new quarterback. And if you're not one of the elite receivers, it can take a lot of time. So Bears fans are collectively reserving judgment till 2023 for the most part on how well the Claypool trade is going to play out. But I'm not necessarily super optimistic that the Bears are going to leave this trade thinking, oh, what a steal they got with a second round pick. At best, you can say, okay, it was worth a second round pick, but it's looking more like, yeah, probably going to be an overpay. It's just a matter of how much of an overpay there.
Yeah, I'm not totally against it. Like you said, maybe a little bit of an overpay. I think it's a move. You give them a full offseason. The results could come next year. I wouldn't really expect that much from him this year, even after that move. So I think that'll be the big time for that. Now, obviously, me and Kevin were talking about this earlier on the show. The weather forecast for this Saturday. There's a lot of unknowns, but we do know whatever does end up happening is expected to be pretty extreme. What are you hearing? What's the talk around the Bears? Are they thinking this weather is going to still be in Chicago at the time of the game? And if it is really windy and obviously freezing cold, does that give the Bears a little bit of a slight advantage compared to normal conditions, in your opinion? Or do you think it really doesn't make a difference either way? Obviously, we know the Bills are favored. The Bills are going to be expected to win this game.
Yeah.
But does the weather help you guys out in a battle like this to keep it closer or maybe pull off an upset?
We've seen enough bad weather Buffalo Bills games over the season that it doesn't necessarily feel like that alone is going to be a major advantage for one team over the other there. Certainly, from what I've seen, we're still looking at like minus 11 type of, and maybe even like feels like minus 20 type of weather there. And I mean, it's always windy in Chicago, especially around Soldier Field down by the lake there. It swirls. So I'm expecting freezing cold and wind, but I think a lot of the snow and such is supposed to be largely clear by then. That people that I know people that are trying to fly out of O'Hare and the Midway airports in Chicago, and we're trying to fly home for Christmas and fly out for Christmas, and like they rescheduled their flights to Saturday. Like that's so like people that were trying to fly Thursday, Friday, and even Wednesday, like flights are getting pushed back to Saturday. So airlines are saying like, okay, we think at least planes are going to be able to take off in that weather by Saturday. So presumably it's still going to be cold and windy, but it's not going to be, unbearable snow or ice or sleet. That's really.
So Saturday forecast looks like travel, everything will be okay, because obviously when the Bills move their game, it's because people literally can't get to the game. There's not a concern that travel will be impacted day of game.
Presumably, I mean, unless I don't know if the Bills tried to come in the night before or if they tried to come in that morning, but yeah, presumably it travel should be okay and they should be able to hold the game. It's just going to be miserable. Like Justin Fields was saying, like the cold is really not that bad. It is the wind. When that's blowing on you, when you're on the field, that's what really makes you freeze. And that's what really makes you uncomfortable. And I don't know, I don't know how windy the Bills stadium tends to be, but it could definitely be a real factor. Like last week against in the Bears last game here, against the Eagles, the Bears punted from the Eagles 36-yard line. Like, their punter was standing at midfield when he punted the ball because the Bears kicker said, like, I can't hit anything from more than like 48 in this wind. And so if we're expecting something similar, those are the kind of areas where you could see it affected the most: downfield passing and the kicking game, where each kicker decides like, this is as far as I can go because these winds are really unstable.
Now, in a situation where the winds are crazy, I know Fields has an arm, but does he have the accuracy in that type of situation? We know the Bills, unless it's just crazy, relentless wind, will try to still throw it regardless of the situation. Everybody remembers the Monday night game against the Patriots last year where Mac Jones only had 3 passes. Bills lost, but Josh Allen was still able to put it in the air 15 to 20 times and still have some modest success with it. Are the Bears going to be able to throw the ball at all? I know they don't like to, but are they going to be able to throw the ball at all in high winds? And if it does come down to a game where it's run against run, are they going to be able to get it done in the trenches, both offensive and defensively, to be able to stop the Bills and win a battle of the lines?
Yeah, so it's interesting for the Bears because they were in a similar situation early this season. I mean, it wasn't snow, but week 1 against the San Francisco 49ers, they were in people were calling it a monsoon. I mean, it's not a monsoon, but incredibly high winds and high rain where the whole field was just a giant puddle and at the end, when the Bears actually won that game, which is crazy when you think back on it, the Bears beating the 49ers this season, when you see how those two teams have gone since then. Justin Fields famous. There's a big picture of him sliding, like almost doing a snow angel, but like sliding with his arms extended like a Superman like through the end zone and towards the stands. The whole team went over and did that and had planned that out. And like you look back at that game, it wasn't a prolific passing game from Fields by any reason, but they did get some deep shots even in that game. I pulled up the numbers quick from PFF. His deep attempts, he was 3 of 6 for 91 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like they weren't tight window accuracy throws. I mean, one of them was another one of those busted coverage plays where Fields gets out of the pocket, rolls to his left, and looks and sees Dante Pettis. There's not a defender 20 yards near him. Like he kind of leaked out to the backside of the play. Fields chucked it like straight, like basically punted it, arm punted it as high as he could. Pettis comes under it like a punt, like catches a punt, and then runs into the end zone untouched because there was just no one near him. But he was able to find opportunities to get the ball downfield. You're not going to see him have, pinpoint accuracy balls downfield in this wind, but if you can find any way to get these receivers open, if the Bills secondary has some kind of coverage bust or some kind of mistake where somebody follows somebody that they're not supposed to, or somebody bites on Justin Fields' legs and his rushing threat, there can be some of those opportunities in there. Like you said, Fields does have the arm strength. He's never been a pinpoint accuracy guy. And that's why you go get a guy like Chase Claypool, who's 6'4" and has a big catch radius, so that in theory, you don't have to be pinpoint accurate. But Claypool hasn't been stellar at those like contested catch plays so far this season either. So the wide receiver talent is probably going to be a bigger factor than the wind itself limiting the Bears passing in. The offensive line and wide receivers, I should say. I think I'm more concerned about them than the actual weather conditions.
You got into it a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, like the Eagles game, how did they keep that close? They kind of disrupted them for the majority of the game. Obviously, Jalen Hurts, leaves the game with an injury, going into this week, but, kind of played through that. I mean, I guess you saw Justin Fields off the field, I guess, cramping going on in his situation where he didn't receive his IV. I guess he's going to receive it going forward, for hydration purposes. Now, look at that game. The Bills, very similar. Bills are the 1 seed of the AFC. Eagles are the 1 seed of the NFC. The Bears, I mean, that's a brutal stretch, but, good learning experience. Like, seriously, like really good for the team to play. So tell me about what did they do right in that Eagles game to kind of keep that close? Obviously, the Eagles did end up pulling it out. Miles Sanders did nothing. 32nd overall DVOA defense that the Bears had, now 31st. So they, ticked that up a notch.
Yeah.
So talk to me about what they did and a little bit about the Bears defense before we kind of get your prediction of this game.
Yeah. So that Eagles game was a lot closer than I thought it would be. I mean, obviously most of us did, but like, I was expecting not a huge blowout, but definitely double digits. Like I thought the Eagles would more than cover that spread and score a lot more than the 25 points that they did. And certainly I have to give the Bears defense some credit because they've been awful all season and they played better in this game than I thought they would against the Eagles offense. I was most impressed in their ability to limit Jalen Hurts as a rusher. That I thought these Bears linebackers have been really particularly vulnerable on play action and getting shots in behind them. Like kind of that intermediate behind the linebackers in front of the safeties kind of area has just been killer for the Bears all season. And I mean, AJ Brown and Devonta Smith each both broke 100 yards in that game. It wasn't like the Bears shut down what the Eagles were trying to do offensively by any means, but they were really quick to react to Hurts as a rusher. And I think just, practicing against Justin Fields all season probably helps in being able to recognize what you're supposed to do in some of those situations, but they tackled pretty well as well. And we're just generally more stout against the running game than I thought they would. But I also think the main reason that game was as close was the Eagles messing up more than the Bears, getting them. Jalen Hurts threw 2 interceptions in that game that were both just real kind of head scratchers. Like one of them was right into the safety's arms. Like the safety didn't really have to move. I mean, right place, right time, I guess you give him some credit for that, but neither interception was, great play by the defensive back. He read it all the way and cut off the receiver and jumped around or made a diving interception. It was just like a weird ball from Hurts that just didn't go where Hurts wanted it to. He was weirdly inaccurate or reckless on the play, and it was a really easy interception for the Bears. And, like Miles Sanders fumbled on a handoff one time. That was a turn. Like the Bears got 3 turnovers that were more giveaways than takeaways is how I would describe it. And so like that killed 3 Eagles drives and set up, I think, a couple of Bears touchdowns in that game. So for me, as long as the Bills don't do that, as long as Josh Allen doesn't get reckless or a Bills player just kind of randomly fumbles in a way that, you don't expect them to, I don't expect a game like this to be nearly as close. And like I said, unless the Bills get in their own way, that's what it's going to take for the Bears to be close again.
That's fair enough. Do you now, I got to ask you about your mindset as you approach the Bills game and in your last 3 weeks in general. Are you looking for improvement? Are you looking to play Fields every snap going forward? Tell me about what you're looking for. Do you really want to get out of that second overall draft choice? Like, tell me about the mindset from just not maybe out of you, but Bears fans in general. Like, anything to cost that draft pick? Are you looking for momentum knocking off, any of your final 3 opponents? I guess tell me about the mindset prior to this game as you go into your final 3 stretch run, obviously, to potentially, gain that momentum into next season. Buffalo, Detroit, Minnesota, good opponents. Following the Eagles, pretty good stretch. The Detroit might be playing for a lot that last week. Minnesota, maybe not a ton. The Bills playing for the 1 seed. Eagles playing for the 1 seed. What's the Bears mindset from a team, from a fan base, as you approach this Bills game and the final games?
Yeah, there's largely been a split this season among Bears fans of like a group that wants to see them play well but lose to get a better draft pick, and a group that still wants to see them win because, of course, like winning is more fun than losing, and it's they're not going to win very many games anyway, so they're not going to win so many that they get out of a good draft pick still. So why bother, or why not try and win some of these games? And that's kind of where I'm at too, especially like now that we're later in the season. There's 3 games left. The Bears are mostly guaranteed a top 10 pick for sure, and given the quality of opponent here, they're probably guaranteed a top 5 pick as it stands. So, I'm on board. You try and beat the Buffalo Bills. Go after them and give one of those wins that shows the rest of the NFL, like, hey, this team is close. Like, they're not a contender this year, but there are aspects of what they are doing that are trending in the right direction. I certainly don't expect them to win this game. I think the Bills are going to win by double digits, but I also thought the Eagles were going to win by double digits. So you never know. But the thing that head coach Matt Eberflus keeps saying is right. Like these last 3 games or last, handful of games, we want to build championship habits, is what he said. Start doing the things that will eventually lead us to a championship, even if it's not even leading you to wins right now, but, establish to make sure that everyone is hustling on every single play, that everyone is playing smart, that everyone is using good form while they're tackling, like all the things that we know this roster is going to look different next year, that, that the whole team as a whole is going to play different and have a different level of expectations next year, but at least start doing the things that you'll need to be doing then also, and get those habits and that culture and everything established over these last few games, and try and win as a result. And at least in games that you lose, can you look at it and say, yeah, this team got better. This team, is making progress in these areas and doing the kind of foundational things that are going to be important. And you just look and say, well, we just don't have as much talent as they do. So at some point, talent wins in the NFL. As much as you want to coach everybody up and do all the things right, some plays Stephon Diggs is just going to be better than Kindle Vildor. That's just a reality of what both teams have, and there's nothing the Bears can do about that if your guys are just better than our guys. So I think that's kind of where they're looking at. It's just saying, like, what can we do that's positive while still trying to win these games? And if you happen to also get a better draft pick too, that's certainly not going to hurt.
Yeah, and Kyler Gordon, a guy the Bills are very interested in the draft process. Obviously, with Kyrie Elam early in the first or mid, they traded up a pick. They were feeling comfortable that they said that Elam was the last first round grade they had on a corner. I kind of believe it because they did throw away another pick to move up 1 slot to secure Kyrie Elam, who's been in and out of the lineup, played really well in press man, just played really well against Miami, played well in stretches this season. And then you see some lapses, and then you see him disappear, the Bills bench him, etc. Expect to see him this week against the Bears, maybe based on this game flow, game script. I want to see him in this game, but Gordon was a guy really highly regarded by the Bills in the process. And, obviously they went a different direction. We see him playing more. Is he expected to maybe, you mentioned maybe not seeing Diggs. Will we mention seeing him on Gabriel Davis? Like, what will we expect to see from him? How have you liked him? And kind of looking at that draft, pool, are you getting a lot out of that? You had a lot of picks, maybe not a first round pick, but let's kind of sum that all up for us.
Yeah. Kyler Gordon really struggled to start the season. They decided to make him more of the slot cornerback early on, and so the way the rotation works now is basically in base defense when they have all 3 linebackers in the field, it'll be Gordon and Jalen Johnson on the outside when everyone's healthy. Then they go to nickel, they'll move Kyler Gordon into the slot, and then bring their 3rd cornerback Kindle Vildor to come in and play on the outside. Now Vildor missed practice on Tuesday with an ankle injury, so we'll see if he's available to go or not. But regardless, they'll still do Gordon on outside and base and slot in nickel. And that's a lot to ask of a 2nd round pick to learn and play 2 positions in 2 different secondary positions in the defense at the same time. So there were a lot of mistakes, not so much like coverage busts where he just doesn't know the play and is in the wrong place, but just, he's just, I think he's thinking too much on the field, that when a receiver, runs a route in front of him, like it takes him a half second to react quickly and anticipate it. Like it's just a little bit slow mentally in terms of how defenses or how offenses are attacking him and how he's supposed to respond. There's been progress. It's still not like where you would hope, I guess, he would be, given he's their first pick in the draft and a cornerback that was highly touted, and some had borderline first round discussion on, but probably wasn't actually going to happen that way. But like you said, a team like the Bills was also interested in him. But again, we're willing to be patient with him on a team that has, I think, the worst pass rush in the NFL, if not the worst bottom three. And that can make a lot of cornerbacks not look very good when the other quarterback has all day to sit in the pocket and wait for a receiver to get open. And, it's not a situation that's super conducive to Kyler Gordon's success either. So there's a certain willingness to be patient with him on that back end there. And we've seen quarterbacks go after him and attack him and have some pretty good success doing so. We've seen quarterbacks shy away from that a little bit. And in terms of the coverage matchups, last week the Bears had Jalen Johnson shadow cover A.J. Brown across the field, left or right side. Jalen Johnson would follow him over there. We'll see if I'm sort of expecting them to then do it against Stephon Diggs as well. The way it would work is Jalen would not go into the slot though. So anytime they put A.J. Brown into the slot, that was Kyler Gordon. So I'm guessing that's the approach we'll look at for Stephon Diggs, where anytime Diggs is on the outside, Jalen Johnson is following him either side of the field. When Diggs goes in the slot, it's going to be Kyler Gordon. So we'll see. I mean, they haven't done that for every big time receiver. It's kind of been selective on when and where they want to do that. But I think a guy like Stephon Diggs merits it, especially just nothing against Gabe Davis and Isaiah McKenzie and stuff. But there's a little bit of a gap there that I think the Bears were going to be significantly more worried about Stephon Diggs. I was a little surprised they did it against the Eagles because Devonta Smith has such cachet as well and was a 125-yard receiver in that game too. But pick your poison on how you want to try and cover these really good offenses.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of tell me about, lastly here, what do you think the Bears defense needs to do to slow down the Bills? And then we'll get kind of your score prediction on this thing. So what do you think that they need to do? Can they do it? I know you mentioned their historically bad defensive pass rushing stats. And give me an injury roundup. Are we expecting to be missing some play? You mentioned a couple throughout the show. Are we expecting to be missing? I saw the injury report, a lot of DNPs on there. Are they more conservative with these? Are they more aggressive? Bills are really conservative. They quite frankly will sit guys in these situations, even going for the 1 seed. How about the Bears? Do you expect to see some of these DNPs? And then kind of how can they slow down the Bills? And then we'll get your score prediction.
Yeah, if there was an easy way for this defense to slow down the Bills, everyone would do it, right? So there's not especially when there's a lack of talent on this end. The Bears have tried everything to get this pass rush going. They've tried moving their 3-technique defensive tackle out to defensive end and going with some heavier rotations. They've put defensive ends inside. They stunt. They'll put, they'll do boss fronts, so big on same side, the 3 guys all on the same side. They'll blitz cornerbacks. They'll blitz linebackers. They'll blitz safeties. They'll drop 8 in coverage. Like, I've seen this defensive coordinator attempt everything in the book that I can think of that what else could you do to try and get a pass rush going? And it really just, none of it works. I think last week against the Eagles, they blitzed Jalen Hurts 11 times. And I think PFF had him with 1 pressure on those 11 blitzes. Like, it just doesn't, no matter what they do, it just doesn't work. So yeah, it's rough. And there's not like I said, it's going to take Josh Allen trying to throw a ball into the wind that, I mean, obviously he's got as big of a cannon arm as anybody, but making some kind of mistake on his own, forcing a pass that he doesn't need to, or fumbling somehow, or a receiver fumbling after the catch, or a ball carrier getting hit too hard and fumbling. I mean, that's the kind of thing it's going to take for this Bears defense to try and slow down the Buffalo Bills. That's what it took against the Eagles, and it's what it's taken against any kind of good offense they've played this season. Doesn't help that the injuries are piling up there.
Yep.
They just put their linebacker Jack Sanborn on injured reserve. He was an undrafted rookie free agent, but playing really, really well, and an instant fan favorite for Chicago fans. I mean, we love, hard-hitting white linebackers in Chicago. That's kind of the history of the franchise there. So they've got backups in at linebacker with them. They got no one consistently on the pass rush, and if Kindle Vildor is injured at the outside cornerback spot, he missed practice with an ankle injury, then they'll put an undrafted rookie free agent Jalen Jones in there, 2 Jalens at the cornerback spots, but he's an undrafted rookie free agent and not a Sanborn level UDFA. So he's just not very good. The Bears have also been pretty conservative with in terms of playing guys. If they don't practice all week, they're probably not going to play. They've got a couple guys with an illness right now that I'm expecting to be able to go out there. including Justin Jones, their defensive tackle. But Jalen Johnson's full participant on the injury report, so he should be fine. And of course, Eddie Jackson is on injured reserve as well. So it's a banged up group, but I don't think they're going to be like drastically more banged up than they already were last week. So you're looking at largely the same kind of group, and then they're going to need the Bills to help them out to make some of those stops on their own. Some penalties would go a long way too. Some holdings and some false starts, they'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, those do go a long way. The best way to stop Josh Allen is still dropping that cover 2 shell, make him make decisions. The number 1 quarterback in the league, getting pressured in with his pressure statistics really strong when he has to break the pocket, break contain. You just don't know what he's going to do. So I still like the more conservative, don't blitz him. I still like the more conservative game plan of let him, like you said, let him make his own mistake. If he does, he wasn't going to anyways. So let's see if he does in this specific game. It's December now. We won't expect it anymore. There's not any margin of error. This is a big game for the Bills. Like it's funny. They can rebound if something negative happens here, but it's definitely a situation to where they're looking for the 1 seed. They want to make sure people come through the weather in Buffalo, and Mahomes has to finally play road playoff games. And this is part of it. Like this is part of what would make Mahomes play road playoff games. The Bills taking this game very seriously, and one that they want to come out with a victory in. So,
and that's one thing about the Eagles last week is there was talk even before the game, like would the Eagles be overlooking the Bears because they've got the Cowboys this weekend in a huge divisional game for them and their playoff seeds. Would they kind of go in this Bears game saying, oh, well, they're 3-10. Like not that teams really like, they're not going to not prepare for the Bears, but maybe they wouldn't be as dialed in for this game, knowing what was going to be next. And for Buffalo, I think it's going to matter a bit more to them than maybe what Philadelphia thought.
And they're way ahead too. Like they have a few games in hand that they could kind of overlook it. In fairness to them, they kind of built that criteria up. Bills dropped a game against the Jets earlier this year. Vikings on a crazy, backward Hail Mary / fumble at the goal line, trying to kneel on the ball. So those are your mistakes you're talking about there. Bills had that game in hand, couldn't get out of their own end zone to kneel on the ball. So they've seen those situations play out before. So they've kind of traded in their margin of error. They will take this game very seriously. With a similar scenario though, most people are counting Monday Night Football next week, Bills, Bengals, for potentially what could be the number 1 seed in our conference. So, but in this case, the Bills don't have the room of our error to make those mistakes. So I do think they'll come in prepared. Lorin, I really appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you so much for giving us 45 minutes here talking Bills. I know you have crossovers with Joe Marino and the Locked On Network. Why don't you tell us where we can find you? And lastly, I'm going to need you to throw down your final score prediction here on the Going Deep podcast.
Oh boy. Well, first of all, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm happy to do it. And I always love talking football there. The Locked On Bears podcast 5 days a week. And I'm on Twitter at Cox Sports 1. As far as a prediction for this game, it's so hard because of the weather, right? It's like the Bears have been in a lot of high scoring kind of shootouts because their defense isn't very good, but Justin Fields finds ways to score points. But this feels more like that week 1 49ers Bears game that finished 19-10 with, of course, that being a Bears victory. And I'm feeling something similar, but just flipped in the other direction there. Like, the Bears get, maybe I'll go like 17 for Chicago and, 27 for Buffalo, like 27-17, something like that, where I don't think the Bills are going to put up 40 just because the weather's not very good, but I don't think the Bears are going to be able to keep it as close as they did against Philadelphia. And it's worth noting that Philadelphia was up a good, I think, 13 or so in the second half there, and the Bears scored later on to make it a 5-point game when it was all said and done. So it wasn't as, the Bears led in the first half, yes, but regardless, the final score doesn't always reflect how close the game is. And I'm expecting, the Bills get out to an early, 17-3 lead or something like that, and then the Bears climb back a little bit, and Bills get a couple more late on, and it ends up being a 10-point game. But Buffalo's in a little bit more control than even what a 10-point game looked like.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lorin. I appreciate all of your insight as always. Really appreciate you coming on the show. You can find Lorin Cox at Cox Sports 1. I know you're on a couple. Are you on a couple different networks right now beside Locked On Bears? Are you doing a couple different things?
I dabble in a few different things, yeah. But Locked On Bears, for Chicago Bears stuff, it's all Locked On Bears.
Perfect. Well, go out, check out the whole Locked On Network and Lorin and the Bears Network. We really appreciate you coming on today, Lorin. Thank you so much.
Hey, happy to do it anytime. See you in 4 years, right?
Yes. See you in 4 years. Hopefully, and maybe a Super Bowl, but we'll see you in 4 years.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks for coming on, Lorin. Well, Mike, that was an action-packed show there from Lorin. Lastly, we need to get your prediction on record for us. Mine we'll get everybody out of here. Do we have film room tonight, Mike?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. I can check that out.
We might have film room later here. I'm not exactly sure if they'll be airing, but you can check that out here on the Cover One Podcast Network. If so, if not, check out all the wonderful shows and watch out for, please check out our One Pass subscription.
Like we do have a film room today. So yeah, that's going to be coming up next.
Coming up right after our show, right after we bounce. So make sure you tune into Eric Turner and the film room crew on the Cover One Podcast Network. Mike, give me a score prediction. And lastly, too, guys, please, One Pass, get an awesome shirt. Amazing Slack channel. If you're sick of Twitter, sick of the Dolphins burner, sick of every other fan base, get onto One Pass. Great subscription to get you Slack, an amazing community to talk sports. You can do whatever you need to do throughout the process. And it's a really cool community. Fantasy sports. We talk bets. We talk games. We talk insider information, everything. Get out there and check out One Pass subscription today. Get a lot for it and a really cool shirt to boot as well. So coming up next, like I said, the Cover One film room with Eric Turner and crew. Mike, give me a score prediction.
First, I'm going to double down on what you just said. Subscribe. Great articles on Cover One. You got Greg Vorse, former Spectrum sports anchor. You got Uber Hans. Tons of great written content that you can't find in the traditional media, plus access to all of our shows. The Slack channel is something else. There's some interesting conversations. If you're someone that doesn't go on Twitter, Facebook, and you want just a community of Bills fans, our Slack channel is a tremendous place to talk Bills football, similar to what you guys do during our live comments during our shows. As far as a prediction, I was about to go 30-13, but then I think I let Lorin maybe talk me into a little bit more conservative approach. I'm going to say 24-10. I do think the Bills are going to win this one pretty comfortably. I'm not going to say this is going to be like a 400-yard day, but I do think the Bills' offense is going to have some success, whether it's in the air or the ground. I want to wait to see what the wind gusts truly are. Obviously, if it's 30, 40 miles per hour, that's going to create some difficulties. But I do like Josh Allen maybe getting some runs involved against a defense that's really been pretty poor at stopping the run. And with what they said about the Bears pass rush, that should give the Bills enough time to at least develop some type of short passing attack, which I think will give them some success in the ability to sustain some drives down the field. I don't think the Bears really have much of an opportunity for success offensively against the Bills if the elements are bad. First off, they don't throw the ball. Second off, I don't like their weapons. That's going to make them too one-dimensional. The one thing the Bills are good at is stopping one-dimensional teams. They can get them out of their strengths. Sure, Justin Fields might go off for a couple long runs. He might break one for 30, 40 yards. Maybe he'll score a touchdown on one of them. But I don't think the Bears will be able to do enough over the course of an entire game. So, like I said, Bills 24-10, but could be even a larger gap when it's all said and done.
Yeah, Mike, I have the temperature by heat, like Lorin was right, by game time, it does not look like the winds might die down a little bit, more like 20-mile-an-hour winds. I think that's advantage Bills. The Bears won't be able to throw in it much at all, maybe a little bit here and there. I think Josh Allen has proven he can find it. He finds it in snow. He found it late in that win game. I think he's feeling pretty comfortable with what could happen. So outside of any drastic changes to the weather elements, I'm feeling pretty comfortable. The Bills stop running quarterbacks. They have historically really good against Lamar Jackson. They were good earlier this year against it. They were fairly good against Kyler Murray last year. They're always good against running quarterbacks in situations. I'm never too worried when they have to play someone who can make a play running the ball. Now they have some broken tackles, tops of the league, double-digit missed tackles in every game lately this season. So there's definitely some, can they get back to sound football? Can they fix some of those fundamental issues, wrap up, focus, and tackle well? Obviously, their gap assignment's been pretty decent this season. They can stop the run. I have no worries about David Montgomery. But they did have a game plan to let Raheem Mostert run. But I think this week they're not going to play the same game plan with no passing attack to scare them. So I do think that you'll see back to that running game. Jets, similar to the Jets game, you'll see that Jets game plan of stopping the run and seeing if Fields can beat you in the air and these elements. I don't think so, Mike. I have 28-14. I don't think there will be many field goals in this situation. 28-14. And this might be one of those games you see like 29-14. You might go for 2. You might miss an extra point. So, I'm going to lock in 27.
21-7, Kevin. I'll lock it in. You just convinced me. 21-7. Yeah,
this is not terrible. I'm going to lock in 27-14. And maybe a missed extra point in there, and the swirling Bills are going to have to kick maybe 3, 4, 5 extra points. Tyler Bass has been good this year, but we don't know what it's going to look like down on the field come game time. But that's going to do it for us on the Going Deep podcast. Thank you, everybody, for sticking in here for an hour and 45 minutes. We had some action-packed guests. Lorin gave us tons of information about the Bears. We don't play them much, so it's always good to get his insight about their future. And going forward, we'll be back with you this 27th. So everybody have a great holiday season. Merry Christmas. We really appreciate you tuning in to our show this year. We're going to have one more. We'll do a kind of a New Year in review as well as a Cincinnati recap here next week, Tuesday, 7:00. The Cover One Film Room is going to be right here with you in 5. Eric Turner and the crew is going to have an amazing topic as always. So get out there, check that out, and get in your film study. But from the Going Deep podcast, Kevin Masseri, Mike Bunt, we'll be right back with you next week, 7:00, same spot on the Cover One Podcast Network.
Josh Allen looking deep, going deep.
To me, talking about the Bills, what else would you rather be doing?
We're hoping to add a new dimension to the Cover One Network.
Slings it deep downfield, and it's caught inside the 20.
Right now, I just want to talk about this championship level. I've never had a championship caliber team to talk about.
I want to focus more on the storylines each week. What are the big stories going on with the Bills? What are thoughts, commentary? How do these things impact Buffalo?
Deep drop. Deep throw. And it is hauled in for the touchdown.
Allen deep to the end zone and caught for a touchdown.
Play action. Allen